Hello and welcome back to the channel. So the month of May comes to an end with another rainy day. This has been one of the rainiest months I can recall. Now I personally love the rain. It's a great time for tranquility, creativity, and also watching movies. I love movies. I think film is one of the great mediums for storytelling. And watching a great film is always such a powerful and enlightening experience. So I thought today we'd talk a little bit about films. And since this is a writing channel specifically, films that are about writing or writers. Now, I just happened to see one recently that I liked quite a bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then stay tuned because I'm going to list what I think are the 10 greatest movies about writers ever made. Now, the film that I saw recently that I liked quite a bit is one that I had never actually heard of. It's a Chevy Chase comedy made in the 80s, but it's not your typical 80s Chevy Chase comedy. It's very far removed from, the National Lampoon vacation movies. It's far removed from Caddyshack or all the other Chevy Chase classics. This one is much more in line with screwball comedies, probably from the 30s and 40s. It reminded me a lot of, Ernst Lubitsch and Preston Sturges and Billy Wilder comedies. The movie is about a sports writer who lives in New York with his wife, who decides to retire early and move to an idyllic small town in Vermont and become a novelist. It's an irresistible premise if you are into writing. It's kind of what a lot of writers sort of dream of doing. But this is a comedy, so it sort of makes fun of that dream a little bit. It also makes fun of small towns and just the whole dream of living in a small town and a kind of Norman Rockwell style. And then it also has a lot of fun with the idea of someone trying to write a novel who maybe should not be writing a novel. There are numerous great scenes of Chase attempting to craft his story, and he's just completely out of his element and really has no idea what he's doing, but he thinks he's writing a masterpiece. So the film sort of mines that scenario for all it's worth and gets quite a few laughs. I found this to be consistently amusing. I think writers will probably get a little more out of it than non-writers, but overall it's just a really well-made, kind of strange comedy. Again, it's not one that you hear talked a lot about, but it's underrated. I really did enjoy it, and it also has a lot of surprises in it. The movie goes places you do not see coming. It's got this really nice feminist angle too that is just played out beautifully, and it's kind of unusual for an 80s comedy to do that. Now, before I dive into the list, a brief caveat. When I'm talking about films that have to do with writers, I'm not talking just about writers of fiction. I'm talking about writers of poetry, prose, drama, and nonfiction. So the genre, you might say, encompasses all of literature. Coming in at number 10, we've got The Ghostwriter. Its irresistible setting on the coast of New England alone makes this film worth watching. And if you like movies with rainy beaches, The Ghostwriter delivers in spades. But beyond that, the film is dripping with atmosphere, mystery, and a growing sense of paranoia. With fantastic turns by Ewan McGregor and Pierce Brosnan, this unsettling and suspenseful thriller may make you second guess your desire to become a ghostwriter. Number 9 is The Hours, led by 3 fantastic performances by Nicole Kidman, Julianne Moore, and Meryl Streep, and also by Philip Glass's iconic soundtrack. The Hours holds up nearly 20 years after its release. Now, when I first saw The Hours, I found the whole conceit of the film to be a bit contrived and overdone. But now, I find that to be part of the fun of the whole thing. And whether you buy into its formal concerns and patterns or not, the whole enterprise is handled with such precision by its actors, director Stephen Daldry, and that irresistible Philip Glass score. It's hard not to get pulled into this deeply cinematic and literary tale of the lives of 3 women tied together by loneliness and storytelling. It's also a spectacular ode to one of the great novels of the 20th century, Virginia Woolf's Miss Dalloway. Number 8, we've got Misery. So Stephen King fans rejoice. Here's one of the best film adaptations of King's work, and my personal favorite. Directed by Rob Reiner, who also helmed one of the other great King adaptations, Stand By Me, Misery presents the ultimate nightmare for a writer. What happens when your biggest fan turns out to be a total psycho? Misery is a blast from start to finish, and while it has all the trappings of a B movie, Reiner and his cast, led by the always reliable James Caan and Kathy Bates, all are at the top of their game. The result is a polished and terrifying thriller about writers, their fans, and the nature of suspense itself. At number 7, we've got The End of the Tour. Now, David Foster Wallace probably would have hated this film, but his life was too interesting for a story not to be made about it. Like the best biopics, this one doesn't focus on Foster's whole life, but rather hones in on a specific moment, when Rolling Stone writer David Lipsky joined Wallace at the tail end of his Infinite Jest book tour, to understand this troubled, enigmatic writer. The result is a beautiful, funny, and unflinching buddy comedy rife with snowy weather, junk food, and big ideas. Though Wallace has a huge, almost cult-like following, director James Ponsoldt wisely stays away from hagiography here. Instead, like a good journalist, he asks questions. The fun ones, the thought-provoking ones, and the ones we tend to stray away from. And at number 6, we've got Bright Star. Now this is the John Keats movie. And it makes sense that a film about one of our greatest poets would be itself deeply poetic in mood and style. Wisely, the film presents its poet as an enigma, and instead invests its emotional energy in the muse, Fanny Braun, played by the wonderful Abby Cornish. A thing of beauty is a joy forever, Keats wrote. Bright Star takes this notion and applies it to its very essence. Number 5 is A Quiet Passion. Here's another film about a poet. This time, Emily Dickinson. Director Terence Davies has always been at the forefront of cinematic artistry, yet he's largely unsung and reclusive. It's not surprising then that he would be drawn to the life of Dickinson, who only became the legend that she is today after her death. A Quiet Passion is a stunning, beautifully drawn portrait, presenting Dickinson in both an unflattering light and a subdued sense of awe. And number 4 is Capote. I'm not sure if Philip Seymour Hoffman gave his best performance as Truman Capote, but it's very likely to be the one he's most remembered by. It's a great impersonation, but it also manages to capture the sadness and cruelty lying within one of our most charismatic and entertaining writers. Credit also goes to director Bennett Miller for taking an unflinching approach to Capote. And no need to have read In Cold Blood to appreciate the film, though you may very well want to pick it up after watching. Number 3 is Before Sunset. So here we have another film about a writer on a book tour, the second and best, in my opinion, chapter in Richard Linklater's Before trilogy. The movie is partly about how writing and life are intertwined. It's also about time, conversation, and what it means to know someone. Lots of big ideas here, lots of things to explore. Yet maybe the great genius of it all is how laid back and organic Linklater and actors Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy make this all feel. It's only 80 minutes, but I feel lost in time whenever I watch this movie. It's just about perfect. Number 2 is Adaptation. Charlie Kaufman and Spike Jonze's second collaboration is, in my opinion, their best. Adaptation gets better with time and feels like a classic already. One of the best films about the nature of adaptation, creativity, and storytelling, Adaptation is, like all of Kaufman's work, equally trippy and melancholic. It also features one of my favorite Nicolas Cage performances in a dual role as Kaufman himself and his twin brother Donald. I'll say no more. And then at number 1, we've got Patterson. Patterson, played by Adam Driver, is a great poet. He's also a bus driver and seems perfectly content with his dual life as a working class citizen and a humble artist. And yet there's also something very sad at the core of this man. It's one of the best films about generosity and creativity I've ever seen. And it's a reminder of the false dichotomy that a writer is either starving and haunted or wealthy and pretentious. I think most writers and creatives are probably more like Patterson, quiet workers who simply find joy in their creative pursuits, and who may dream of a better world, but also understand that not attaining it is completely okay. Alright, so that wraps up the list of what I think are the 10 best movies about writing ever made, and it also wraps up this video. So if you haven't seen any of those films, definitely check them out. I think they're all great. And if there's any films about writing that I didn't list that you particularly enjoy, please share them in the comments. But anyway, that's a wrap on today's video. Thanks so much for watching. Please give it a like if you can, and subscribe to the channel also if you haven't done that. And well, that's all I've got. So we'll see you next time.